Hello, kind people. That's Ragnar. He's a good boy. And today we're talking about chapter 6 in Think and Grow Rich, which is imagination, the workshop of the mind. So, let's get started. Just a little recap and introduction of where we're at. We've been transitioning away from just thought and towards actual action. And we're at a point where we should know exactly what it is we want because of the definite chief aim that we've set. We've been developing positive thought habits that align with our goal through autosuggestion. We believe it is attainable because of the faith we have or are developing in ourselves. We've looked at our past experiences and our knowledge to see what is relevant and useful towards the attainment of our mission. Now we're called to recognize and utilize imagination as a tool for developing plans, right? Plans that are actionable. So, what is imagination? If someone were to come up to you right now and ask you, what is imagination? Describe it to me. How would you respond? And let's say you do respond. What use does imagination have towards the attainment of one's goals? So right now, if I were to ask you, okay, define imagination to me, and then you define it however you define it, and then I ask you, okay, well, how can I use that towards achieving my goals? And that's where Hill is at in this chapter. He's dedicating an entire chapter to imagination, right? He starts the chapter off by saying on page 113, the imagination is literally the workshop wherein are fashioned all plans created by man. The impulse, the desire, is given shape, form, and action through the aid of the imaginative faculty of the mind. So for Hill, the imagination has extraordinary capabilities, right? Our imagination is where we entertain our thoughts and ideas. The imagination is where we give life to our plans, our thoughts, our goals, and desires. Anything that is not in our physical presence right now, or even our world, we can imagine, right? We can even imagine things outside of our existence. For example, a heaven. And I'm assuming most of us have never been there, but we can imagine what it would be like when we hear concepts of it or discuss it, and we imagine, right? So every business, invention, civilization started as a thought, but those thoughts were developed into plans through imagination, right? They didn't exist beforehand, and there may have been nothing to compare it to. So first they were developed as ideas and transformed in one's mind through the use of imagination, and that's why Hill calls it the workshop of the mind. An idea sparks into your mind, and then you work on it through your imagination into a point where it's an actionable plan. The imagination determines one's limitations. So on page 114, Hill writes that man's only limitation within reason lies in his development and use of his imagination. So we're told growing up that children have wild imaginations, and as adults we lose that untethered imagination because we are hit with negative realities of life and lose that innocence, or simply because we become pessimistic. Our goals constantly don't happen, life throws curveballs at us, things don't work out or match our expectation, and we begin to see the world for what it is, and anything else is child's play or an idealism that can't be realized. People say be realistic, and they say it as a way to dull one's goals almost, right? Like, you're shooting too high, be realistic. And Hill does not share that perspective, and instead says that imagination is a crucial tool for progress. And he breaks imagination down into two forms. So he says there's synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Synthetic imagination is simply the arranging of old concepts, ideas, and plans into new combinations. And he writes that on page 114. Right, so you already have ideas, You've seen, for example, a pen, and then you see a different kind of pen, and then you're like, I can merge these two into one super pen, right? So you're taking old concepts, ideas, or plans, and you're just combining them into new combinations. And creative imagination, and here for Hill, the mind is communicating with infinite intelligence or God. It is where our intuitions, hunches, and signs are received. It is where new ideas are obtained. So you might just be walking down the street and then boom, an idea comes out of nowhere. Or you have an intuition, slow down, and then boom, something happens in front of you that if you didn't slow down, you would have hit it, or something would have happened, or whatever. So you have a hunch or an intuition seemingly out of nowhere. And it's a completely new idea that you haven't thought of before, or that no one has thought of before. Where did this thought come from? I'm going to stay away from this type of metaphysics altogether, but it's there if you're interested in digging deeper into it. So desire is fleeting, and how we can use imagination in the creation of our plans. On page 116, Hill writes, desire is only a thought, an impulse. It is nebulous and ephemeral. It is abstract and of no value until it has been transformed into its physical counterpart. What does Hill mean by this, right? Because after all, the first line of chapter 1, it says, truly thoughts are things. And that's on page 1. So now he's saying thoughts are just an impulse, and they're nebulous and ephemeral, right? It's abstract and it has no value. He's saying that transforming any thought into physical reality requires the transforming of this fleeting thing, right? That we can't see, touch, hear, smell, all our senses aren't working on it, into a tangible plan, right? How do we take this fleeting thought? Because our thoughts are constantly changing and moving all day. We can't keep one thought in our brain all the time, right? Even if you are obsessed and you get cut off, your thought will change. Oh shit, gotta react to this car. And then maybe you'll go back to your obsession, right? But your thoughts are constantly changing. So it's fleeting and it's intangible. How do we transform that into its physical counterpart? And these plans happen through the active use of imagination, right? You have to be able to take this thought and work on it in your imagination and play with it and think about how it can become actionable. And the goal of the plan is to bring it into physical reality. So our desires don't really mean anything if we don't or we can't bring them into reality. What's the point of desiring to become 6 feet tall naturally when I'm 5'5"? It's simply not possible, right? Or wanting a candy bar right now and I want a coffee the next and something else after that, but I never get them. A bunch of fleeting desires that might be nice to think about in the moment, but don't lead anywhere. Or I have no actual intention of actualizing those desires. So thoughts are things for Hill. However, we won't stop only at thought. We want to translate our definite chief aim, our main desire, into a reality, and that can't be apart from action. This passage is at the top of 117. Reduce your plan to writing. The moment you complete this, you will have definitely given concrete form to the intangible desire. The moment you reduce the statement of your desire and a plan for its realization to writing, you have actually taken the first of a series of steps which will enable you to convert the thought into its physical counterpart. By writing out your plan, again, you've taken the first step into making it a physical reality. You took that thought and then you translate it into paper. Meditate on your desire. And you keep meditating on it until you have an actionable plan. You write out that plan. Now the only thing, that is an action, right? Even meditating on something is a type of action. You are sitting there or walking or whatever you do to meditate, but you're meditating on this idea and you're holding it in your thought and working on it. That is an action, right? Because if you weren't acting on it, you would simply forget it or move on to the next thought or go hang out with a friend or go play video games or whatever it is that the next thing on your life is at that moment, right? So by choosing to do that, you are taking action, even though it's intangible. You're acting on your thought, right? By putting it into the workshop of your brain and using your imagination to develop a plan. You develop a plan. It might not be the perfect plan, but you write it out on paper. By writing it out, again, that's the first step in your plan. You just acted. Now what's step 2? What's step 3? And you keep working on it until you can turn your desire into its physical counterpart. On page 125, Hill writes, the preacher writes, "For nearly 2 years I had been thinking, but I had done nothing but think. It was time for action." How is he actually going to hit this goal of making $1 million? He didn't care anymore. In his mind, it became something which he would make happen. No more stalling and simply thinking about it. Any action became better than no action at all, right? You couldn't just live with thinking, oh, if I had $1 million, any action was better than nothing. On page 127, he writes, "When he put vagueness into the background and definitely said, 'I will get that money within a week,' things worked out for the preacher." A reminder that all success starts with definiteness of purpose or dedication to a goal. However, dedication or definiteness of purpose becomes animated and given power when backed by a burning desire to translate that thought into reality. I might not actually make that $1 million in a week, but my chances are better than if I don't think that at all, right? If I never took that thought seriously and worked my hardest towards making that $1 million in a week versus not working towards it, right? So dedicating myself to that goal. We can always extend timelines. We can always snooze the alarm. But you need to set it and you need to work towards it, and action needs to come. You can't just keep thinking about it, right? You can't just keep thinking about your definite chief aim. It's time to put it into action. Now, I can be dedicated to my goal and work towards it very slowly. For example, learning a language. I just do the bare minimum every day. Now, imagine I have a trip coming up to the country where they speak the language that I'm learning, and I really desire to master as much as I can before I go. I back up my definiteness of purpose with a burning desire. Right? I'm going to meet the locals. I want to talk to them in the language. Right? I'm excited to go there. I've been waiting to go there, and now I actually have a chance to use this language rather than me just using it on the app and whatever for nobody, and I can't talk to anybody or have no one to talk to in the language. I'm literally going to be surrounded by it. So I retain more because I'm more interested. It takes less effort to do the learning because now I have something to look forward to and I'm excited about it. I persist in the lessons for longer than I normally would, and this shows the power of mixing a goal with a burning desire or an obsession. Right? Getting excited about it. So, thoughts and imagination. On page 128, it says, "Generally speaking, an idea is an impulse of thought that impels action by an appeal to the imagination. All master salesmen know that ideas can be sold where merchandise cannot." Right? And on page 129, ideas have no price attached to them. The creator of ideas makes his own price, and if he is smart, gets it. So it's easy to tell someone to stick the course when it's guaranteed, but the reality is that there is no certainty in life. However, if you want it, then you need to take the risk, and having a healthy imagination allows you to have hope. Believe things can work out for the better. Think of alternative strategies and view things from multiple perspectives, using imagination to develop plans that are actionable. If you've been following the series so far and you've been reading the book, you have a definite chief aim, so you know what it is you want, regardless of if you've made it an obsession or not. Now is the time to create a plan towards its attainment. How do you create a plan towards its attainment? You use your imagination. That's what Hill is saying. You sit and you think and you meditate on what you want. You hold it in your brain. You combine new ideas or ideas. Maybe you need to do some research. Okay, well, what's my actionable plan? Well, these are the next 5 actions I need to take. I don't know about how I'm going to get to this point. Well, use your imagination. Look up how other people are doing it that are successful. Look up research. Figure out what you can do. Do you at least know the first step? Maybe when you start working on the first step, the second step will reveal itself. So on and so on. Right? You need to imagine that you can do it. Imagine having faith in yourself, what that would feel like. Imagine. Use your imagination. It's not a bad thing. It can be a bad thing when it doesn't lead to action, but the point of imagination in this chapter is to use it to develop a plan that is actionable. It's an imagination aimed at something specific, which is turning your definite chief aim into a plan. Think about it. Meditate on it. Combine ideas that you've stumbled upon. Find new ideas through the use of your imagination. And boom. On page 132, Hill writes, the favorable break came through Carnegie, but what about the determination, definiteness of purpose, and the desire to attain the goal, and the persistent effort of 25 years? It was no ordinary desire that survived disappointment, discouragement, temporary defeat, criticism, and the constant reminding of waste of time. It was a burning desire, an obsession. When the idea to write this book came to Hill, it was simply a seed planted in his mind. However, he needed to keep the seed alive. He writes on page 132, you keep it growing by imagining it is possible to continue growing. You realize your definite chief aim by using your imagination to find ways that you can realize it. Imagination. Don't kill your imagination. Use it towards your goal. Figure out a plan. If you haven't done it now, sit and use your imagination to think of a plan. Think of a plan. Even if it's not the best, perfect plan, think of something, right? Use your imagination to come up with some kind of plan. You can always adapt it. You can always change it, but you need to use your imagination right now to create a plan that will get you closer to your definite chief aim, that you can begin turning it into a physical reality. No more just thinking about it. Right? If the first action you take is simply in your mind by using your imagination to create a plan, the second action is writing it out. The third action is whatever the first actionable step was on that, right? But that's still 3 steps that you need to act towards. So, have a goal, use your imagination to come up with a plan, and then get to it. And I'll see you next time.